Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we have not made one of these in quite some time, and we have big trades happening. We have big time NFL free agents moving places. So this should look a lot different than the last time we made this video. But before we get into it, you better be dropping that like. You better be subscribed if you play Dynasty Fantasy Football. And if you play Dynasty Fantasy Football, I can guarantee you will love flogfantasy.com, where all your favorite Dynasty experts are. You can find all of our rankings there, all of our exclusive articles, exclusive videos, exclusive live streams. When you sign up with promo code FLOCK with the link in the comment section or the description, with promo code FLOCK, you will get 30% off. And with code FLOCK, you will get myself going through and breaking down your Dynasty team with that mother flocker tier. But I think that should be about it. Let's go ahead. Let's dive into this video. Starting off, numero uno, Bijan Robinson. I know it's boring, but he goes to Philadelphia at pick 10. So, I mean, if we're looking at this draft capital, looking at this offense, your initial reaction is going to be, oh my gosh, this is the best thing in the world. And I'll say real quick to the people down there in the comment section saying, well, they just signed Rashad Penny. They wouldn't go. They gave Rashad Penny $500,000 guaranteed. Okay, please don't think a signing like that in free agency makes any impact at all on a team's decision to go through and take Bijan Robinson. I mean, if we're looking at what this team did last year, what is, in my mind, a little exciting but deceiving, 32 rushing touchdowns. The Philadelphia Eagles had 32 rushing touchdowns. Now, of course, Jalen Hurts led the team in rushing touchdowns with 13, but still, even if we were to remove those 13 rushing touchdowns, we're still looking at like 20 available. Now, of course, I'm not sitting here saying Bijan Robinson would step in and see 20 rushing touchdowns in Philadelphia. Still probably have a pseudo running back by committee. Not really. He's going to be a 3-down player, but you may get Kenneth Gainwell occasionally in there at the goal line. We don't really know. And at the same time, I think what we may end up seeing at the end of the day is the Philadelphia Eagles offense coming back down to earth just slightly. It will still be an elite level offense. Of course it will be. But last year, they were number one in the NFL essentially in rushing. And at the same time, they were tied with the Kansas City Chiefs for total points scored. Now, I think the Philadelphia Eagles offense will be great, but I don't know if they're going to lead the NFL again. So we probably have the offense falling back down to earth a bit. You probably have Jalen Hurts vulturing some of those rushing touchdowns at the goal line. But at the end of the day, it's Bijan Robinson. You're taking him at 1 regardless, especially if he's an elite level offense. Now, going over to pick 2, this mock draft's interesting. We're seeing Bryce Young go to the Carolina Panthers. Now, in my mind, I think it's most likely going to be CJ Stroud, but it doesn't really matter. We're playing the what if game here. And in my mind, I think that whoever goes pick 1 to Carolina, that is who we have to take as our number 1 quarterback off the board in Dynasty. Because if we are going to collectively sit here and say that, okay, I am smart enough, Mason Dodd is smart enough to figure out who's the better quarterback between Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, or anybody you're watching on YouTube, if they try to tell you that they know who's the better, okay, don't be listening to them. Don't be listening to me. With quarterback evaluation, it is so difficult because there are so many different variables that go into the quarterback prospect coming out of school. A, the coaching staff he had in school. B, the scheme that they had. C, the offensive line play that they had. D, the weapons that he had. It is so difficult to evaluate all those different measurables, those different variables from quarterback performance in college, that I personally have had way more success saying we are going to let the NFL take care of the quarterback evaluation for us. We are going to focus in on draft capital, what the NFL tells us about these quarterbacks, rushing upside, rushing upside, rushing upside, because obviously it's going to translate to fantasy football points when rushing is a cheat code, and then also situation that they're stepping into. So I'm going to go Young at 2, Stroud at 3. Stroud ends up going to the Houston Texans directly after. And then instead of just following it in the order that these players were drafted in and taking Will Levis here at the 104, I'm actually going to go Anthony Richardson 104. Even if in this mock draft, Richardson falls down to 8 and the NFL is telling us, well, maybe Richardson's not as good as Levis from a real life perspective. It doesn't matter. You take Richardson strictly because the rushing upside is so damn high that you can't be passing up on a player that can break fantasy football, that can go out there and have 40 rushing yards a game and come away with double-digit rushing touchdowns in a given season. Here in this mock draft, it goes to the Atlanta Falcons. You're looking at an offense that has, in my mind, one of the true elite young wide receivers in the NFL with Drake London. You also have Kyle Pitts, probably on the path to being the best tight end in the NFL 3 years from now. So it'd be a phenomenal situation going over to Atlanta. You have a ton of rushing upside. So I will go Richardson. And then I know our next player, not a lot of people like in Dynasty, because a lot of people in Dynasty feel like they are able to go through and evaluate quarterbacks better than NFL talent evaluators can. This is why we saw the Dynasty Community taking Dwayne Haskins over Daniel Jones, even though Daniel Jones had more rushing upside and more draft capital. This is why we saw the Dynasty Community taking Josh Rosen over Josh Allen, because the Dynasty Community thought they were so much smarter than everybody else, and that it didn't matter that Josh Allen was the number 8 overall pick in the NFL draft, that he demonstrated rushing upside in college. We are convinced, and by we, I mean everybody else, that Josh Allen was a bust before he hits the NFL field. I don't know if Will Levis will be good or not, but what I do know is if he goes pick 4 to the Indianapolis Colts, he is stepping into a pretty damn good situation in Indy. He has all the draft capital in the world to guarantee him that starting job for the foreseeable future, and he did demonstrate rushing upside in college. So I know a lot of people are saying this is aggressive to be taking Levis here. In my mind, if I were to try to convince myself that I'm some expert quarterback guru scout, I think I'd be fooling myself. I think everybody else is fooling themselves when they try to do so. I'm going to listen to what we have going on here with our process. I'm going to take Levis at this range, and I'm going to feel comfortable about it. Now, our next guy will be Jackson Smith-Njigba. Okay, I actually love this landing spot, right? He goes to the Green Bay Packers at 15. And if we're going to be looking at the natural fit that we have in Green Bay, the number 1 wide receiver there is going to be Christian Watson, undoubtedly. But with Christian Watson, this is a wide receiver that's that big play, deep threat guy that's going to be playing on the outside. And of course, that is an extremely valuable asset to have on the field. But if we insert JSN, he's going to be more so that flanker slot wide receiver that will be able to play off of Christian Watson. And I think they will complement each other so well. So well. Obviously, I've already talked up JSN as a player. Love the fact that he was dominant his sophomore season in one of the best wide receiver rooms college football has ever seen. He gets the NFL draft capital we're looking for. Don't really know if Jordan Love's going to be good or not. I definitely have my questions about Jordan Love. I'm not as excited about him as other people are, but love JSN the talent, and I actually love how he'd complement Christian Watson. Now, going over to our next spot, we're going to be looking at Quentin Johnston, who finds himself as a New England Patriot here. I mean, if we're going to be looking at Quentin Johnston in round 1, I understand that New England goes out there and they add weapons this offseason. Of course they do. But Johnston, in my mind, can still be the long-term answer at wide receiver for them. This is a team that still doesn't have the long-term answer at wide receiver. Really, the only young weapons that you have are going to be Tyquan Thornton, if we want to classify him as that. And with Tyquan Thornton, he's literally just a field stretcher. He's never going to be someone that's stealing fantasy football production away from Johnston. With Johnston, he broke out as a freshman. He dominated as a junior. He declares early for the NFL draft, and he is a first-round NFL draft pick. He checks pretty much every box that we're looking for. I actually really like taking him in this range. Now, our next guy, Jordan Addison, I have some questions about. With Jordan Addison, phenomenal sophomore year. Comes back down to earth as a junior, but at the end of the day, he breaks out as a freshman. He dominates as a sophomore. He declares early for the NFL draft, and he is a round 1 NFL draft pick. So he's another guy similar to Quentin Johnston that checks almost every box that we're looking for. The one difference between the two is I have my own questions regarding Jordan Addison's size. And you'll notice that, yes, at the beginning of the offseason, I was taking Jordan Addison ahead of Quentin Johnston. But since the NFL Combine, since he came in about 170 pounds, and we look historically, and really the only wide receivers to be successful with that frame over the past like 20 years really have been what? I mean, Deshaun Jackson, Devonta Smith, John Brown, and Hollywood Brown. And all those wide receivers were significantly faster than Jordan Addison. And so I have that red flag with him, but still it's one red flag with an overall profile that is very strong. Going over to Seattle, you're the long-term answer for Tyler Lockett aging out there, the long-term complement for DK Metcalf. I feel comfortable taking him in this range, particularly because our next two players, the running backs, in my mind, find themselves in crappy situations. In this mock draft, and I know this sounds crazy at the time, but it's possible. We know that crazy things happen in the NFL draft every single season. Jahmyr Gibbs falls to round 3. Jahmyr Gibbs goes pick 77 to the Los Angeles Rams. And from a real life NFL perspective, I actually think Jahmyr Gibbs would fit very nice on this roster. Because if you're going to be looking at how this team has decided to use Cam Akers so far through his NFL career, with Cam Akers, even though he caught the ball at Florida State, they've decided to turn him into a first and second down grinder. With Cam Akers, he's definitely flashed at times, but they have never been willing to give him that workhorse role. Of course, had the torn Achilles. I mean, with just the rehab from that, we would assume that Akers gets better and better and better as his NFL career progresses and he gets further away from that injury. But I think it makes a lot of sense to bring in Jahmyr Gibbs, an undersized running back, weighs less than 200 pounds, and say, okay, Jahmyr Gibbs, you're going to be our third down back with upside. And Cam Akers, you're going to be our first and second down guy. I think that they maybe try to deploy what we had with DeAndre Swift and Jamal Williams last season. And if we have Jahmyr Gibbs falling in that role and he falls to the third round of the NFL draft, even though he is an elite pass catcher, an elite athlete, very similar to what we were talking about with Addison, while you have those elite traits on your profile, in my mind, falling to the third round is kind of a red flag based on where we thought he was going previously. And also, obviously, the size and the lack of touches inside the 5-yard line in college. Now, our next guy, Zach Charbonnet, 78, goes to the Green Bay Packers. I honestly didn't even want to put Charbonnet this high. He goes pick 78. I really like the player. He's a running back that has the size to handle a 3-down workload and is also a great pass catcher out of the backfield. So that's really nice to see. I mean, the overall profile you love. Day 2 draft pick. I mean, this will be someone I'm all over. But in this landing spot in Green Bay, Aaron Jones just restructured his contract. Aaron Jones isn't going anywhere. A.J. Dillon at the same time is still pretty damn young. A.J. Dillon drafted in 2020. So I don't love the landing spot. I think Zach Charbonnet, if he were to come here, would be almost a nothing burger in 2023. I think beyond that, maybe in 2024, then you see something. But the issue is, if we're looking at that Aaron Jones restructured deal, the Packers could save $5 million from moving on from Aaron Jones in 2024. That's really it. They're still going to have $12 million against the dead cap. So I would hate this landing spot. Now, our next guy I'd hate the landing spot with as well. We have Zay Flowers going over to the Baltimore Ravens. I mean, Baltimore clearly needs a wide receiver. I mean, get back Rashad Bateman, add in Zay Flowers. They go through how Mark Andrews at tight end. Don't really know what the situation is going to be this upcoming season at quarterback, of course, but it doesn't bode well that it's an uncertain situation. And what we've seen over the past few years has been horrendous, with the team having no passing volume. If you're Zay Flowers as well, very easily you could be the third target on this depth chart behind Bateman, behind Mark Andrews. Of course, you could be wide receiver 1 over Rashad Bateman. But if you have the possibility to be the third guy in a low passing volume offense with a lot of uncertainty, I really don't like that. And also, quick side note, Zay Flowers is older than Kyle Pitts. Like, what the hell are we doing here? Our next guy, Jalen Hyatt, going to the New York Giants. Really like this fit from an NFL perspective. I think that he almost is just a better version of Darius Slayton. And if we're going to be looking at Hyatt, I think he would complement Darren Waller. Darren Waller playing over the middle. Darren Waller probably seeing the majority of volume. And the Giants clearly need weapons. They clearly need speed on the outside. But at the end of the day, Hyatt, even though he'd be a round 1 pick, even though he'd be going to a team that needs weapons, is a wide receiver that does not profile to be a volume hog. He profiles to be a much better real-life wide receiver than fantasy football wide receiver. I mean, we've talked about this over and over again. Josh Downs, our next guy, 35. With Josh Downs, I mean, I love the production profile. You're seeing him go to the Indianapolis Colts here, and in my mind, he would actually be a natural fit. You have Michael Pittman playing on the outside. So Michael Pittman Jr. is on the outside. You move Josh Downs to be a slot wide receiver. Obviously, Josh Downs himself is undersized. And that's why I'm going to be a little bit hesitant. Going back to what we were talking about with Jordan Addison, we've seen undersized wide receivers have success at the NFL level, but really the only guys we've seen that from in recent history have been Hollywood Brown, Devonta Smith, Deshaun Jackson, John Brown. That's it. And all those guys were speedsters. Downs isn't a speedster. Even though we love the production profile, even though it would be a natural fit, I do think we have to bump him down just a bit here. I would love him getting the capital, though, of being an early second rounder. Now, going over to our next guy, we're actually going to go over to a tight end here. We're not Michael Mayer going over to the Los Angeles Chargers. I mean, it's a team that goes out there. They re-signed Donald Parham, but in reality, you take Michael Mayer here. I'm assuming he's your tight end of the future, regardless of what you did in free agency. So tight end that has a phenomenal profile. This is an offense that should be very good. And Justin Herbert needs another weapon. I think this would be a great fit. And then Dalton Kincaid, our next guy, 16. Kincaid going over to Washington, which in my mind, obviously Washington needs a tight end. And Dalton Kincaid's a very good prospect. But at the same time, you're putting him in a situation where there are weapons in this offense. I mean, you have Jahan Dotson. You have Terry McLaurin as well. So it's not like the same situation as Michael Mayer is going to a team that for the long term really only has Mike Williams. No, you have wide receivers for the long term in Washington, and you don't have great quarterback play. We don't really know what the situation will be at QB. So I don't like the landing spot, but I like the player. And going down to 39, we're going to be looking at Rashee Rice, a wide receiver that just looks like, I mean, a typical small school stat piler. I don't necessarily love the profile, but if we're going to be looking at what he gets in terms of his draft capital and landing spot, going to the Carolina Panthers is about the best thing you could ever ask for. Because if we pull up this Panthers depth chart at the time I'm recording this, Terrace Marshall's your wide receiver 1, Laviska Shenault's your wide receiver 2, and you just traded up for a franchise quarterback. So we're going to just assume that they were possibly able to go through and solve the quarterback dilemma they had. We're going to assume that they're able to fix that situation. And they have no weapons at all on this team. Miles Sanders is the best weapon you have. So I think Rashee Rice would landed possibly one of the best spots. Now, going over to our next guy, Devin Achane is someone that as soon as we got his official size numbers at the combine, I said, you know what? I pretty much have no interest in this guy. I understand that, yes, he is an elite level athlete. I understand that, yes, he's a very good pass catcher. But for him to be 188 pounds with a BMI under 28, I don't know what we're really hoping for here. Very similar to Jalen Hyatt. I think he can be a very good real-life NFL player. But from a fantasy football standpoint, do we ever expect this player to be able to average 12-plus touches a game? In my mind, no. In my mind, you are drafting him praying that he's James White. And that's chasing an outlier. And even when you hit that outlier, you don't have a high ceiling. In this draft, he goes to the Houston Texans in the 4th round, which clearly has been a massive fall from where he was being mock drafted earlier this offseason. I will say this landing spot in Houston, I think makes a ton of sense. Because if we're looking at the investment, 4th round pick, this is a perfect player to be adding in. What he does well, I mean, he is exceptional at. But, of course, he can't do everything, so you're getting him at that significant discount. I think he would be a great real-life complement to Dameon Pierce. With Dameon Pierce, he can catch the ball, but it's not necessarily his strong suit. So I think you bring in Achane as that complement, but he doesn't have the draft capital. He doesn't have the size. So, yeah, that's why we're going to have him this low. Sean Tucker, 130, will be our next guy. Goes to the Buffalo Bills in this one. I mean, Buffalo has no real long-term answer at running back. And in reality, depth charts don't matter too much. If we're looking at day 3 picks, you're kind of just chasing profiles that you really like. Sean Tucker, we didn't get the official numbers at the NFL Combine, but he tweeted out a video telling us, trust me, I'm an elite level athlete. We already knew he was an elite level athlete. He has the size, the athleticism, the passing down ability. He has almost everything we look for. The only issue is he doesn't have the NFL draft capital. Falling to pick 130 is brutal, but I still love the player, and obviously Buffalo's an elite offense. Now, 113 will be Roschon Johnson for us. Goes to the Atlanta Falcons, and I actually would like this from an Atlanta perspective, where you hit on Tyler Algier last year. Tyler Algier looks like a running back that can do a little bit of everything. Of course, he's not an elite back, but you're not ready to be competitive immediately. And if you're bringing in someone like Roschon Johnson, in my mind, it's kind of similar to Tyler Algier. Maybe an underrated player that can do a little bit of everything, that has the size to be a 3-down guy. If he ends up hitting his 90th percentile outcome, he can be a phenomenal football player. But if you're the Atlanta Falcons, there's no reason to go out there and invest significantly into the running back position where you're not ready to compete. But here, 113, I think it's a phenomenal price point. Now, 55, we're going to go Darnell Washington, a tight end that goes around 2 of the NFL draft, but an elite level athlete and very similar to the running back position. Athleticism actually matters at tight end. Athleticism strongly correlates to fantasy football production. He's a player that also making highlight grabs at the combine. He's a player that in Detroit, in my mind, be a very good landing spot. This team has a clear hole at tight end since they lost out on TJ Hawkinson. But I think that's all I have for this video. Of course, if y'all enjoyed it, please go down there, drop a like, subscribe if you play Dynasty. And if you play Dynasty, I am sure that you are going to love flockfantasy.com. Go down there, get access to all this cool stuff we have going on. Promo code FLOCK in a mother flocker tier. You truly will go through, make a podcast of your Dynasty team to get 30% off any subscription. But thank you again. I appreciate you. Really hope you have a great day and really hope we get to see you with the video tomorrow.